This Korando is the most class-competitive car that SsangYong has ever bought us. Targeted at Qashqai-like crossover models and more affordable compact lifestyle SUVs, it's an ideal way for the Korean brand to ease back into the UK market. If you're looking for something inexpensive and a little different to the norm, it might well be worth a look. Think of a Korean car maker and it's a fair bet that you won't be thinking about this one. Which must be frustrating for SsangYong, since the company is actually one of the longest established of all the Asian brands. Recent years have seen all kinds of turmoil with the takeover by Indian conglomerate Mahindra and various ups and downs with the UK importers. Look beyond that though and you'll find a well-established business with a heritage that goes all the way back to 1950. Back then, one of this maker's most important models was badged Korando. It still is. Which makes this one of the longest serving models of all time. Despite that, it's a car that enjoys virtually zero recognition across the market segment in which it must compete. That for Qashqai-like crossover models and the soft-roading, lifestyle-orientated small SUVs that are just like them. Now, we're talking here about the budget end of this sector, so Kia Sportages and high-end iX35s are this car's competition rather than Toyota RAV4s and Honda CR-Vs. And 5-seat only models too, since that's what this is, so strike out comparisons with pricier budget brands 7-seat options like, say, Chevrolet's Captiva. It's a part of the market in which you'd think even an unknown manufacturer might enjoy some success if it were able to offer a good-looking car with more power, greater interior space and more equipment than its rivals at a more affordable price. And that's exactly what's on the table here. This Korando offers smart Giugiaro styling, a purpose-designed 2-litre diesel engine that can be more powerful than anything else remotely comparable. For the first time in a SsangYong, a monocoque chassis for sensible school-run ride and handling, and a high specification at pricing that makes opposition models look needlessly expensive. On paper then, a great proposition, but then it would need to be to overcome the what on earth is it factor and enable this car to somehow gain a foothold against talented rivals in this tough market sector. Is it capable of doing just that? Let's find out. Now, you'd expect an up-and-coming brand to borrow an engine, or at the least, engine technology from someone more established for a car of this importance, especially with SsangYong's modern-era history of relying on outdated Mercedes oily bits under the bonnet. But no, the Korean company here has gone it alone and produced its own in-house diesel, and a very powerful one at that, the fastest 2-litre version of this unit, developing a pokey 175 PS. Now, this is in a market sector where most diesel rivals typically have power outputs of between 135 and 150 PS. There is inevitably a slight running cost penalty to pay for all of this extra grunt, and for those unwilling to pay it, the SsangYong engineers have developed a 149 PS eco version of this unit. They've also provided a 149 PS 2-litre petrol power plant for this car. Here though, I'm driving the 175 PS diesel model, a car which, perhaps not surprisingly, is quicker than just about all its competitors, rest to 60 taking 9.9 seconds on the way to a maximum speed of 112 miles an hour. To put that into perspective, that's about 2 seconds and 5 miles an hour quicker than the kind of 1.7 litre CRDI diesel, high-end iX35 or Kia Sportage that would cost you significantly more. Now, with 360 Newton meters of torque, you really notice the difference of this car's extra power. It's able to pull up to 2 tons if you're towing. And going back to the high-end and Kia models I've just mentioned, well, they can pull just 1.3 tons. That's quite a difference. This car also has an 80 kilogram tow bar limit. It is, in short, the most powerful towing car in its class, which will sell a significant number of people on this car right off the bat, whatever its other attractions. Now these kinds of people, towers and so on, will probably also want the torque-on-demand four-wheel drive system fitted to the top variant that I have here. It's one of those clever systems able to shunt torque, power around between the wheels depending on which one has most grip at any given time, so that power is always used most efficiently. And unlike some rivals, it also has a lock function operable via this button on the right down here that enables you to better prepare the vehicle for soft or really loose surfaces, or to help you extricate your Korando from somewhere that you really shouldn't have ventured with it in the first place. It equalizes the power front and rear to give you the best possible chance of traction. Not that this should suggest this SsangYong model to be any kind of fully fledged off-roader. It isn't. All previous SsangYong SUVs have been, but to facilitate that they've needed clunky ladder frame chassis, and that's led to pickup standards of ride and handling, all of which would have got this Korando precisely nowhere in on-tarmac comparisons with rival Qashqai-like crossovers and lifestyle soft-roading SUVs. So for the very first time, SsangYong has equipped this design with a more car-like monocoque chassis. It's still enough to make this car as capable off-piste as most owners will ever need it to be. There's an approach angle of 22.8 degrees, a departure angle of 28.2 degrees, and a ramp angle of 18.5 degrees. A little surprisingly, you don't get the kind of hill descent control system that some rivals offer to help you when you're slithering down steep slopes. But there is a hill holder clutch that should help you when you're starting off going up very steep inclines. But of course, most of this will be pretty irrelevant for the majority of potential Korando customers, most of whom will probably opt for the front-driven two-wheel drive model. So what will this car feel like in its more natural habitat on tarmac? Well, not as sharp as some of the class-leading contenders, I have to say. The steering's a little too vague and the ride a little too wallowy for that. You also have to get used to the diesel engine's rather narrow power band, with all of the torque arriving in something of a rush between 2,000 and 3,000 RPM. Having said that, if you're not a driving enthusiast, and few buyers of this kind of car are, then you're probably going to find this model's ride and handling balance perfectly adequate. After all, if all you're going to do is cruise around most of the time on half throttle anyway, why buy a car of this sort intended for country lane cornering? If you're of that kind of mindset, then you'll probably be the sort of person that would be most likely to want to specify the 6-speed automatic gearbox option, especially as the standard 6-speed manual can be a bit notchy. Refinement wasn't really a strong point of this car at its launch, but since then, SsangYong's engineers have worked hard to bring standards of NVH, that's noise, vibration and harshness, down to expected class levels. Known in Italy simply as Il Maestro, Giuseppe Giugiaro is quite simply one of the great automotive stylists of his generation, and in the clean sculpted look of this Korando there's certainly evidence of the master's deft touch. It might not be remembered alongside, say, the Fiat Panda or the DeLorean as one of his most enduring designs, but it's certainly a big step forward from the awkward, rather ungainly Ken Greenlee pen designs that used to characterize this brand. It's actually quite a handsome thing, with a squat stance, beefy wheel arch bulges, an artfully sculpted front end and a sharply rising belt line. For those interested in the technicalities, this is SsangYong's first model with a modern monocoque chassis rather than a rather old-fashioned separate body-on-frame arrangement, and this translates into all kinds of suspension refinements which in turn translate into a more upmarket feel on road. The rear end's cleanly styled too, with a rear spoiler designating four-wheel drive models like this one. The interior is also smartly crafted, if a little generic. Hide the badge on the steering wheel and few would be able to guess exactly what kind of car they were sitting in. Actually, come to think of it, perhaps in this case that's a good thing, because even with the aid of the SsangYong badge on the steering wheel, few would be able to identify this model. Storage space is reasonably generous. You get pretty ample cubby between the seats, twin cup holders just behind the gear stick, a central cubby on top of the dash, a reasonably ample glove box, and decently sized door pockets in both the doors. Getting comfortable at the wheel isn't a problem thanks to a height adjustable driver's seat and a reach and rake adjustable steering wheel. And thank goodness you get a proper conventional handbrake rather than one of those fiddly electric button things. The build quality overall is quite good, but this is a cabin more notable for its appointments rather than overall standards of fit and finish, with some of the materials having been perhaps justifiably chosen to match this model's affordable pricing. You may object to that, but you can't argue with the amount of rear seat space on offer. This is the only car in this class, premium brands included, able to properly transport 3 fully sized adults on the back seat for any real distance. Legroom is reasonably plentiful and aided for the middle seat passenger by the fact that, unlike with many rivals, there's no bulky transmission tunnel. Out back, boot space isn't quite as generous as you'll find in some of the class leaders, but at 486 litres, it's a lot more than you get in, say, Nissan Qashqai, and there's some extra space for perhaps valuables under the floor here. And as usual, you can push forward the 60/40 split folding rear seat to extend it. So, one 5-door, 5-seat body shape for which a range of 2-litre engines have been developed. These can drive either 2 or all 4 wheels depending on the model selected. There's a choice of either manual or automatic transmission and a selection of trim options at prices ranging between £17,000 and £23,000. That's the Korando proposition in a nutshell, but you might be wanting a little more detail than that. In which case, let me give you a bit of guidance based on the 2-litre 175 PS diesel variant that I'm trying here. That's the setup this car was launched with and the one that most UK customers will choose. So, assuming that it's this particular engine that you're looking at, then I'll tell you that most Korando buyers will want to find the £2,500 premium necessary to trade up from the entry-level S to the mid-spec ES model, at which point you also get the alternative of a 6-speed automatic gearbox. Now, all of that will get you 2-wheel drive Korando motoring. If you want the 4-wheel drive version, a car like the one I have here, then you have to give your SsangYong dealer an extra £2,000 over the cost of an ES model, for which you'll get in return not only the all-wheel drive system, but also EX badging and a rear spoiler to advertise its fitment to the outside world. There's also an automatic gearbox option at 4-wheel drive level. That then is the proposition. But the key question is, how does that stack up against tough opposition in the crossover and soft-roading compact SUV market sector? We're talking here of budget-minded models, of course. Cars similar in concept, but a lot pricier. Models like the Volkswagen Tiguan, the Ford Kuga, the Toyota RAV4 or the Honda CR-V. Those sorts of cars will be well beyond the means of the average SsangYong Korando buyer. So, what can he or she expect here? Well, before I answer that, here's some inside information for you on the world of motoring journalism. Most hacks are biased towards the brands that look after them, and most don't do their homework properly. This Korando is a case in point. Every review that I've read on this car castigates its pricing for being about the same as that of better established rivals. Well, that's rubbish for a start. At the bottom end of the Korando pricing spectrum, the S model at about £17,000 costs around £1,500 less than the least expensive 1.7 CRDI diesel versions of a Kia Sportage or a Hyundai iX35. And that's despite the fact that those two cars are at a massive 60 PS power disadvantage to this SsangYong, which means that they won't be able to tow or lug things around as easily. In fact, I'd challenge you to find another car of this kind with anything like this SsangYong's 175 PS output for much less than £20,000. To save you the trouble, I'll tell you that there aren't any. The closest soft roading stroke crossover type diesel 5-seat alternatives I could find were Nissan's 130 PS 1.6 litre DCI Qashqai, which would cost you nearly £3,000 more, or Mitsubishi's 150 PS 1.8 litre diesel ASX, which would cost you nearly £4,000 more. Okay, so the base entry-level Korando is good value. But what if, as I have here, you want to order this SsangYong with 4-wheel drive? Well, the importer's decision to offer this particular layout only with the top EX trim level means that the price in this case isn't quite as eye-catching, but it still manages to offer a level of value that no competitor can quite match. The asking price for this particular car at under £22,000 is better value than virtually anything else on the market, say perhaps a Skoda Yeti 2-litre TDI 4x4. And that's not much less expensive. It's a slightly smaller car and it's at a significant 40 PS power disadvantage. Also less powerful is the kind of Hyundai iX35 2-litre CRDI diesel 4-wheel drive model that would cost you about the same as this 4-wheel drive Korando. And the issue of a lack of power also applies to the kind of Kia Sportage 2-litre CRDI 4-wheel drive or Mitsubishi ASX 1.8 litre diesel 4-wheel drive that would cost you around £1,500 more. Also less powerful and would cost you around £2,000 more would be a comparable Suzuki Grand Vitara 1.9 DDIS diesel. That's got about 130 PS. And for around £3,000 more, you'd still be looking at less power if you opted for something like a Nissan Qashqai 1.6 DCI 4-wheel drive. That car also has about 130 PS. So you get more power for less money with this Korando. Hopefully I've established that. So would it be asking too much to also expect higher equipment levels than those offered by comparable versions of obvious rivals? Apparently not. All versions of this Korando get alloy wheels, roof rails, tinted glass, electric heated mirrors, rear parking sensors, all-round power windows, air conditioning, cruise control, a 6-speaker MP3 compatible Kenwood CD stereo with iPod and Bluetooth connectivity and controls on the leather stitched steering wheel. You also get hill start assist to stop you drifting backwards on uphill junctions, a Thatcham Category 1 alarm and to help you at night, puddle lights that shine down from the door mirrors and headlamps that stay on just long enough to guide you to your front door. Opt for an all-wheel drive EX model like the one I have here and the kit tally grows substantially. You can expect to find leather seats that are heated front and rear and electrically operated for the driver, climate control, a sunroof, power folding mirrors, privacy glass, larger alloy wheels and that rear spoiler. Whichever Korando model you choose, there are only really 3 main options: a tow bar, metallic paint and an upgraded Kenwood stereo system with or without sat-nav. Safety wise, you can expect to find twin front, side and curtain airbags along with anti-whiplash head restraints and Isofix child seat fastenings. To try and make sure that hopefully you'll never have to use any of this stuff, there are the usual electronic driving aids. That means anti-lock brakes with electronic brake force distribution to make them more effective, and also the ESP stability control setup with ARP anti-rollover protection. At first glance, the fuel and CO2 returns recorded by this Korando, at least in top 2-litre diesel form, lag a little behind those obvious rivals, even if you opt for the 2-wheel drive version that many customers will want. That's at first glance, but you need to take a second look because there's a reason for that. In top diesel form, after all, this car produces around 30% more power than its most obvious rivals can manage. And viewed in that light, the 47.1 miles to the gallon combined cycle fuel figure of the 2-wheel drive top diesel Korando, the 175 PS one, well, it's really not too bad. It's only fractionally behind 2-wheel drive diesel versions of obvious rivals like the Hyundai iX35, the Kia Sportage and the Mitsubishi ASX. The CO2 return recorded by this Korando isn't quite as close to the class norm. The two-wheel drive 2-litre diesel 175 PS model manages 157 grams per kilometre. Mind you, that's no worse than something like Toyota RAV4 2.2 D4D. And you can get the CO2 figure down anyway by opting for the eco version of this Korando in 2-litre diesel form, the 149 PS model. And with two-wheel drive, that particular variant records 147 grams per kilometre of CO2. So that's the two-wheel drive story. But many buyers, probably understandably, will struggle to see the point of buying a car of this kind with just two driven wheels. So what kind of penalty will the imposition of four-wheel drive bring to the running cost proceedings? Well, not too onerous is the answer. Let's take the car that I'm driving here. It's got the top 175 PS 2-litre diesel engine, and it's got four-wheel drive, and it manages 44.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and puts out 169 grams per kilometre of CO2. If you want to improve those figures, then opting for the 149 PS 2-litre diesel eco version means you'll get 47.9 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 157 grams per kilometre of CO2. And that latter figure is really important because it means that this particular variant can dip under the all-important 160 grams per kilometre of CO2 company car tax banding level. Bear in mind though that whatever engine you opt for in this car, specifying it with the 6-speed automatic gearbox is going to hit you in the wallet region when it comes to running costs. For the two-wheel drive 175 PS diesel model, you're looking at 38.7 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 194 grams per kilometre of CO2. If you specify the same car with four-wheel drive and the automatic gearbox, you're looking at 37.7 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 199 grams per kilometre of CO2. Finally, for the sake of completeness, I'll give you the figures for the minority interest 2-litre petrol model. In two-wheel drive, it'll give you 37.6 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and put out 175 grams per kilometre of CO2. If you have it as a four-wheel drive, it'll record 34.3 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and put out 192 grams per kilometre of CO2. What else? Residual values? Well, they're a bit of an unknown at present, but they won't be as good as those of obvious rivals. You'll need to factor that against this car's better value proposition up front and the very impressive 5-year limitless mileage warranty that it offers. Insurance groupings, you're looking at group 19 on the 1 to 50 grouping scale for the top 2-litre diesel version I'm driving here. It's hard to think of a car maker that has come so far so quickly as SsangYong. This Korando is the best thing the company makes and feels a million miles and 20 years better than its immediate predecessor. Yes, as the brand itself would admit, this remains a work in progress. But the signs are with this car that the marque is learning very quickly just what European customers really want. Already when it comes to things like pulling power, rear passenger space and sheer value for money, this Korando can take on and in some cases beat the best of its competitors in the crossover and soft-roading compact SUV sector. It's better off-road than many of them too. If in future it could be a little sharper to drive with a little extra running cost efficiency and interior quality thrown in, then established rivals really would have something to fear. Even as it stands though, this SsangYong is a difficult option to ignore if you need a car of this kind to tow, to regularly transport 5 and to offer plenty of kit on a tight budget. You'll just have to get used to explaining to people what it is. And who knows, you might end up suggesting that they try one.